Hi again, in this episode we'll explore how to use Photoshop with Flix. We'll go through some of the main features and use cases, and by the end of this episode we'll have a deeper understanding on how these features can improve the workflow. The first thing we'll do is create a panel. If you already have a panel in Flix, double-click on the thumbnail and the image will open in Photoshop. Select New Template to create a panel with the aspect ratio specified on the Flix plugin under Aspect Ratio. This will create a background and a layer in which you can start drawing. I'll go ahead and make a first iteration on this panel. Now we're ready to send our first iteration of this panel back into Flix. Since we already have a blank panel in our project, our aim is to replace it with this image. With this panel selected in Flix, select Replace Current Image. We now have a second iteration of this panel. We can select the bar at the bottom of the thumbnail if we need to go back to a previous iteration. Going back into Photoshop, and again you can double click on this panel to open it with Photoshop, we're now going to create the following panels. So there are many ways that you can create panels in Flix. You can create them individually from the same Photoshop session. You can make rough sketches using the thumbnailing tool or set layer comps. For now, let's create the next panels individually. So I'll go ahead and make a few changes to this panel. When we're ready to send a second panel back into Flix, you can select Current Image. This will send it to the right of the panel that is selected in Flix. So that's why it's good to keep an eye on which panels are selected in Flix, so that when you create a new panel, it'll automatically place it where you want it. So as we start to draw the movement and start to build our story, we can already see how this is a really time-saving process. There's no need to save files anywhere, to worry about naming conventions. Flix will really take care of all of that and store all the iterations and panels you've created on the server. So you're also less likely to lose work and obviously lose time looking for a panel or recreating it entirely. And as you can see, I've just created a few panels without even moving away from the application. There are even options at the bottom of the Flix plugin to enable you to go to the previous or next panel or even open it without ever moving away from this window. So already after learning just the first few tools, we can start working with Flix really easily. To reiterate, New Template will create a blank panel, Current Image will place a new panel to the right of the one selected in Flix, and Replace Current Image will replace the image selected in Flix and create a new iteration. The next thing we'll introduce is working with thumbnails. Click on New Thumbnails and it will create a template split into 9 panels. So we can go ahead and sketch a sequence of images, and this is our first iteration, so we'll start with a really loose sketch. And once we're done, we can send all the panels back to Flix with one click. To keep the original file, select Always Send Original as Master. Then select the option Send Thumbnails, which will send the 9 panels back into Flix as individual panels. In Flix, select the bar at the bottom of the panel where we can find the original Photoshop file on the Masters column. This will open the original file containing all of the thumbnails. So the use of thumbnails is really to create a first draft really quickly. Each of these panels will now open as its own panel, and then we can keep iterating and refining them individually. When dealing with multiple panels, it is recommended to have Always Send Original as Master selected. This comes especially useful when working with layer comps. And that's because from this master file, you have the option to iterate multiple images at the same time. So this is what we'll do next. I've created a simple layer comp setup consisting of 4 panels. And from here, we can select the option Each Layer Comp. Once done, this will create those 4 new panels in Flix. If you tick Always Send Original as Master, this action will also send the original Photoshop file and store it in the Masters column. If you ever need to change all of the 4 panels at the same time, then that can be easily done. So in this example, the background has seen a change, and this will impact all of the panels in the layer comp. So from this master file, select Replace Each Layer Comp. and this will iterate on each panel. So when we now select the bar at the bottom, we can see that there are 2 iterations of that panel that have been created, and as you can see, there's a new master image. One thing to keep in mind is that this operation will start replacing panels based on the image selected in Flix. So you want to make sure that you have the correct first panel from the layer comp selected in Flix for this option to work. The last thing we'll cover in this video is the cropping feature. So if you have the whole set on a canvas, for instance, the whole environment, then we can crop individual parts and send them as panels in Flix. This operation will also send a master panel from which you can return to the original Photoshop file. So this is especially useful, partly because when we're storyboarding, this is the point where we're making huge decisions that will impact the whole show, and the director or supervisors are more likely to change their minds at this point, and that's okay. This is the time where we want to make as many iterations as possible. So this feature really enables you to be as non-destructive as possible, so that if you need to change the positioning of the character on the set, that's a modification that can be easily done. Before we wrap up this episode, it's important to point out that Flix will optimize all Photoshop files that are sent to it. So for any panel, if there are any hidden layers or parts that aren't contributing to the image, Flix will remove it entirely. And that's another significant advantage of using Flix, is that the files you're working on are always optimized. It's very easy to let a Photoshop file get very busy with old drafts, forgotten and hidden layers, so this functionality will also save you a lot of time and effort, because you don't need to worry about cleaning out your scenes. I hope you've enjoyed this episode on using Flix with Photoshop. The next few episodes will go through the integration with Storyboard Pro, and then we'll delve into some of the main features of Flix and understand what tools we have at our disposal as a story artist, regardless of the sketching tools we use.